That was Lucy Williamson reporting from South Korea. You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is Owen Bennett-Jones with NewsHour. Before the end of the programme, we'll be hearing from a former British ambassador to Pyongyang about life in North Korea. But just now we're going to start with the issue of immigration. There was a big intervention yesterday by 8 senators, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, who made their proposals for immigration reform, just getting ahead of President Obama. His speech was scheduled. They wanted to get ahead of it. So President Obama has now given his speech 24 hours after the senators made their comments, and it finished about an hour and a half ago. And he was talking about the whole issue of immigration reform, and we can hear a little excerpt of what he said.
Immigration's always been an issue that inflames passions. That's not surprising. You know, there are few things that are more important to us as a society than who gets to come here and call our country home? Who gets the privilege of becoming a citizen of the United States of America? That's a big deal. When we talk about that in the abstract, it's easy sometimes for the discussion to take on a feeling of us versus them. And when that happens, a lot of folks forget that most of us used to be them. We forget that. I mean, it's really important for us to remember our history. You know, unless you're one of the first Americans, a Native American, you came from someplace else. Somebody brought you. You know, Ken Salazar, he's of Mexican-American descent, but he points out that his family's been living where he lives for 400 years, so he didn't immigrate anywhere. The Irish, who left behind a land of famine. The Germans, who fled persecution. The Scandinavians, who arrived eager to pioneer out west. The Polish, the Russians, the Italians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the West Indians, the huddled masses who came through Ellis Island on one coast and Angel Island on the other. Now, all those folks, before they were us, they were them.
There we are. That was President Obama speaking about an hour and a half ago, and the BBC's Paul Adams was watching that speech. He's just joined us now. It was, quite a general scene-setting passage of the speech, I guess, just making the general case. Did we get much specific on what he wants to do?
We got a little bit of detail, Owen. He outlined several pillars of his proposals, and they are essentially the same as those outlined by members of Congress yesterday. A lot of emphasis on border security, the need to make sure that the borders were stronger, cracking down on companies that hire undocumented workers, making undocumented immigrants accountable before they can get on a path towards citizenship. That means that they've got to pay fines and back taxes and all the rest, and learn English before they can be eligible. And then streamlining the whole legal immigration system to improve things like the ability of families to be united. All of that fleshed out in a great deal more detail by the White House, which issued 6 or 7 pages of detail this afternoon.
Right, well, that's quite interesting, isn't it? So the White House did feel the need to put out something pretty specific.
Yes, I think that everyone wants to give the impression that people are thinking about this and thinking about it in detail and quickly. I think the White House was perfectly happy that the senators, 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, went first because it enabled the president to say, as he did at the beginning of his speech, that he was very encouraged by evidence that Congress was finally ready to tackle this problem, a problem that people have tried to look at in the past but have always failed. But I think he feels like a man in a hurry. He knows as a second-term president, he's got a limited amount of political capital. He's got a lot of things he wants to do, and he thinks this is something that can be done and done quickly.
And I think the crucial point to understand is he's talking about border security and then looking after the 11 million illegal immigrants in that order.
Yes, and that was very much a common feature of his proposals and the ones outlined yesterday by members of Congress. Frankly, this isn't going to go anywhere unless sceptical members of Congress, and indeed sceptical members of the public, particularly in those key southwestern states affected by illegal immigration or the immediate impact of illegal immigration, can be reassured that everything is being done to make sure that that border is as secure as it can be. Now, there are lots and lots of different views about what that means, and that debate will be a long and complex one, but that's why he wants to get out front and say, that is the first thing that has to be addressed before the rest can really be undertaken.
So actually not a whole lot of difference between what the president's saying and what the bipartisan Senate group is saying.
No, though I think there was a greater emphasis from the members of the Senate on some form of commission, as they described it, to actually assess the success of the border security effort. No reference to that in what the president has said or what the White House has released that I can see so far. And that suggests to me, a greater level of skepticism on the part of those Republican members of that group of 8 senators that this really needs to be looked at very, very carefully, and everyone needs to be thoroughly convinced before they move ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Paul Adams there. Let's get some immediate reaction from someone who has a view on border security. Glenn Spencer, volunteer border guard, patrolling the US-Mexican border, trying to find illegal immigrants coming in, then photographs them, can't arrest them, is not empowered to do that, but photographs them to document what's happening. So the president saying border control should come first and then look at the illegal immigrants. What does he think?
Well, let's set that aside for a moment and say yes. But the problem is let's define what border security means. We haven't reached that point. Everyone agrees that we need to secure the border, but no one has defined what it is. That's what our organization has been working on for the last 3 to 4 years. And it is not only defining what it is, but coming up with a way of measuring it. So we have developed the technology, tested it, and it could be installed on the entire border in 3 months, and we would know where we stand, how many people are crossing illegally. We've proposed a number. No more than 20,000 people crossing the border and getting into the United States illegally between ports of entry. And then we would lay down a thing we call the sonic barrier. It's also called identicize. It's an adaptation of site exploration technology, proven. And we've tested it, and it works. We could lay it down on the entire border in 3 months, count everybody who crosses, and then in a very short period of time, say, we've done it. We're there. Let's have our discussion on amnesty.
But you're sounding as if you're very dissatisfied, and yet, from what I can understand, 8 senators yesterday and the White House are saying they want to do border security. So they're agreeing with you.
Well, they are in a way, but they're not defining it. This is the devil is in the details,
right,
as you will learn. And so when you start looking at the issue, you'll find that there is no definition, there is no objective measure, and this leads to a lot of mischief, political mischief on the part of those who supposedly will help us enforce the law.
Glenn Spencer, can you stay on the line? We've got a couple of other guests, and I'd just like you to comment at the end. And so listen to what they're saying, and then I'll ask you to come back a little later. So Chris Pavelski, let me bring you in. You are a 4th-generation onion farmer. I was lucky enough to visit your onion farm a while ago, and I just wanted to ask you about undocumented labour, because you're in New York State, I should say, and you rely to some extent on undocumented labour, don't you?
Well, first, it was a pleasure when you came to my farm, Owen. I have to say that. Agriculture, for the most part, in the United States, it's estimated somewhere 90% or more of the agricultural workforce is undocumented. There's somewhere between 1 to 2 million workers. We have to follow the law. As employers, we fill out I-9 forms, and they submit documents to us when we fill out those forms, but invariably those documents turn out to be bogus documents. But right, it's a big problem in agriculture.
So this is quite a confusing situation. You say these workers turn up from where?
Mostly in my area. They're coming from Mexico or Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, for the most part.
And they have false papers.
Correct.
And then, but it's not your job to be an immigration officer, so you don't have to assess the validity of their papers. You just say, I've got some papers, and therefore they can work, right?
Matter of fact, we fill out the I-9 forms, and they actually, the Justice Department has a warning on there saying if we attempt to determine what the validity of those papers are, we face potentially prosecution from the Justice Department for discrimination, and also a lawsuit as well from Farm Worker Legal Services. So, yeah, you're exactly right.
Why do you need to rely on undocumented labour from Mexico? Why can't you just hire some local lads?
It's funny. I mean, no one basically wants to bend and stoop work in farms, and that's across the board in agriculture. There are no local people out there clamoring to work on my farm at $8 an hour to pick weeds. So we have to rely on a foreign workforce, people who are willing to do it. There's a guest worker visa program for agriculture. It's the H-2A visa program, but the H-2A visa program is a terrible program. And while there's between 1 to 2 million estimated agricultural workers in the United States, roughly only 30 to 60,000 of them are employed through the federal guest worker visa program for agriculture. So it's got to be fixed.
If no citizens are prepared to do the work that you've got on offer, then are you saying that if these reforms go through and the border is closed, as we just heard Glenn Spencer saying he wants, so you go bust? Is that right?
That's exactly right. When the president's been actually very tough on border enforcement and the like, and the number of undocumented, whatever, crossing the border is much less under Obama, and he's been doing a big-time enforcement raids and such in farms, mainly in western New York in particular. There's a lot of raids that go on farms where they're rounding up farm workers. So he has been very strong on it. But one of the things he talked about was the verification system and the like. And if you don't reform the guest worker visa program and you implement E-Verify, which is what he was referring to, most of agriculture in this country will go out of business.
Okay, I've got the point. I'm grateful for it. Thank you very much, Chris Pavelski. Glenn Spencer, very quickly, going to bring you back in. Your measures, then, would drive him out of business.
Well, I find it interesting that a man who makes money off of the low price of labor would like a lower price of labor. I think research has shown that when the price of labor is risen, the farmers stay in business and people make more money at a wage that they can live off of. But we've seen the border in the last 4 months explode. August 15th announcement of a modified amnesty program. The amount of apprehensions of people crossing the border here in southern Arizona, provable, went up by a factor of 10. One author once said the word amnesty is like a starter's pistol. We're seeing a rush across the border in anticipation of an amnesty program that is going on right now.
Volunteer border guard Glenn Spencer. Well, Luis Romo is 23 and has been in the United States for 17 years now, since he was 6. He came from Mexico with his parents when they paid someone to take them through the desert into America illegally. Last year, the DREAM Act directly affected Lewis because he was given protection from deportation under that act, but it takes a while. His case is being registered and processed and so on, and even at the end of that process, citizenship is not guaranteed. So, after listening to the President's speech, what did he make of it?
I really thought the President was going to be ahead of this problem, ahead of putting enforcement first. This rhetoric, I was just hoping for more.
Right, and what about your parents? They are in the United States illegally, are they?
One was deported 4 years ago due to this broken immigration system, of course.
And so the amnesty would make a huge difference to you, because that means the parent that is in the United States illegally would become legitimate.
Absolutely.
So in that case, how come you're not happy? Why are you dissatisfied?
I am happy. I'm just a little bit concerned that, especially when giving yesterday, you take that we're gonna start giving permanent residency once the border is secure, and the people who are gonna decide that they never have measures of when that is gonna be. They just keep saying it's never enough, and that's just the fear that it's never gonna be enough for that party.
Right, I see. So you think that people who want more border control will never be satisfied with the amount of border control, and therefore nothing else will happen.
Absolutely.
And that was Luis Romo there.